Last but not least, we've got Roger Staley. Roger is CEO of the Australia African Minerals and Energy Group, Amig. Roger's an internationally experienced senior mining management and business professional with over 40 years of involvement in the mining industry, having undertaken roles on both the customer side of exploration and mining and the consultancy side of sales and services. Roger's lived and worked in Africa for almost 10 years, during which he developed strong relationships with diplomats and Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade representatives. He was responsible for global and regional businesses whilst based in Australia, Zambia, Republic of Congo, UAE and Canada, interacting with all levels of government and local stakeholders. He is a fellow of the Australian Institute of Mining and Metallurgy and a member of the Australian Institute of Geoscientists. Welcome, Roger.
Well, I've done it again. Last night I proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that I don't know how to drive the buttons on this thing, but there we go. Because I'd actually like to dwell on the first slide, and because that statement there, helping Australian companies prosper and do the right thing in Africa, is really what Amig is all about. As I'll demonstrate over the next few slides, we're a membership-based organisation representing Australian companies, so exploration companies, mining companies, and services companies, operating in the resources space in Africa. And hopefully I can show you a couple of compelling slides as to why companies join our organisation and what we can do to assist them in their journey through Africa. And one of the benefits of not working for a commercial institution is that I don't have to inflict a disclaimer slide on you, but rather than you feeling left out, I thought I could give you a really busy chart which is right up there with that disclaimer slide that people normally share. What we're seeing on the left and what's summarised in brief on the right is the ASX listed resources companies holding ground in Africa. Those companies are present in more than 36 countries in Africa. The number changes quite regularly. And it's been a bit of a surprise to learn where those companies operate and indeed the commodities they're pursuing. I guarantee if you ask most people at this conference where Australians most prevalent in Africa, they probably wouldn't say South Africa and they probably wouldn't say coal. But that's the fact, is ASX listed entities, the number one destination is South Africa, 32 Australian companies operating there, the majority of them pursuing coal, and 17 of them are members of Amig. So that tells us a little bit more about the chart on the right. I've only listed out the top 10, but the rest of that data is available and I'm very happy to share it with everybody. And it's been a very useful tool when we get approached by companies that say, we're looking at going to this country in Africa, who else is there? And we join them together. We say, here you are, these are the other companies that are operating there. I'm sure that they would be happy to help you on your journey through there. And we also provide the links to the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade in Australia, as well as to Austrade, and indeed some African countries we have are members of Amig as well. So that kind of sets the context where Australians are operating in Africa, and then a little bit more onto our organisation as to why would they want to join Amig. And I've alluded on the first slide, and I'll reference it again here, is we're all about advocacy, and that is advocacy with governments, be they the governments in Australia and related entities, and the governments of Africa. We've built some very strong connections with African governments who've sent representations to this conference, or they're in contact through our colleagues in the Department of Foreign Affairs, seeking Australians to come and invest in their country. So we're very happy to have them on as associate members of our organisation, to make the relative introductions and to help learn more about what needs to be considered when operating in those countries. So that's the advocacy piece. The second piece around what we do is the insights. And you probably gather from what I was talking about, the advocacy, is we need to understand what's going on for Australian companies operating in those destinations. And so we rely heavily on our members, such as those that have preceded me on the podium today and indeed for the last 2 days. What's going on in those countries? What are the learnings they have from their regional communities? What have been the key learnings, the key successes when operating with government over there? Because it seems to be quite a feature of Australians operating overseas that we don't see a competitor relationship. Often we see a collegiate relationship where those companies want to help other Australian companies arrive, particularly around the services space. So that's the advocacy and the insights. And then the key part of what we do is the connections piece. I've alluded to making connections between individuals and companies and governments, but we also meet here at least once a month in what I regard as the best resources-based networking sessions, or sundowners, typically held once a month, where we get at least 100 people along to each of those. It's usually a full house. And indeed, it's like a mini-me version of this conference every month. Bring them together, and that's where the advocacies and the connections get discussed and people renew their acquaintances, and indeed, sometimes deals are done. And those bullet points that are there are the sort of things that get talked about. Now, this next chart's a little bit busy as well, but I just ask you to look at the first column. So why do we poll our members every year and say, why do you come to Amig? What is it you're looking to us to do to help you? And those top 3 things on the left is, number 1 is country risk, and secondly, compliance, and thirdly, the ESG. It was interesting. It's the members typically look to themselves and to specialist contractors on the ESG. So whilst it is an overarching importance to the industry and Australian players overseas, typically they look to us and their relationship with us and our other members to helping discuss the risks in country, such as are detailed there, and the compliance. And this is often changing, and therefore is a big effort to keep on top of it. And indeed, the information we learn through there, so that we get the insights from our members, and indeed we share those with the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, who share it out with their heads of mission, and I'm pleased to see a couple of them in the room, most welcome, in the various jurisdictions. So there's a very tight relationship where we're all aware of what each other is doing and why. So that's a little bit about us and what we do and why we do it and who we do it with. And now I'd like to illustrate in the last few slides, and I'm certainly not going to take up 8 minutes of your time, but last night in this same room, indeed with many of you present, we held our annual Amig Africa Awards, and it was an outstanding success. These kicked off 4 years ago, where Amig wanted to shine a light on Australian companies doing the right things in Africa and doing things right in Africa. So these awards are implemented. They've grown every year, and we're having a review of the awards in a couple of weeks, and I strongly feel that we'll be looking at offering more awards next year, more sponsorship. I think it's getting to be very big, but a very important part of the calendar of Africa Down Under, and we thank PADA for providing the forum for us to hold this event. But we have offered these 3 awards for the last 4 years. Last night, we actually made a 4th award. We felt there was such strong competition, 12 nominees for the 3 awards, that we thought it was really important, or the judging panel thought it was very important, to offer a 4th highly commended award for one of the companies, which I'm pleased to see here tonight. G'day, Nina. So Best Workforce and Industry Development Initiative. I'll just back up. We typically have looked at good things that companies have done in the last 12 months. Now, of course, over the last couple of years, that's been affected by the pandemic. So we've opened up the criteria a little bit to say, let's look over the last 2 years, what you've been able to achieve. And in that context, these 3 awards that you can see here, the Best Workforce and Industry Development Initiative, the Best Innovation in Corporate Social Development, and an award to the Emerging ESG Leader. I'm just going to celebrate those winners and the highly commended award over the next few slides. And we've made a big social media post today, or I think it's due out very soon, reiterating what I'm about to tell you. And there's a lot of information going to come up on these next few slides. You don't have to read it all. It'll be on social media today. And again, we're available anytime to share those messages. And a big side benefit is particularly companies that are new to Africa, be they services companies or resources companies in their own right, are starting to look at this catalogue of projects that's being done by these nominees this year and indeed the previous 3 years and say, we could do that. And so again, we remain available to make those connections being very much one of our operating pillars. If there is companies present that think, we'd like to get some wisdom on how to do this or where to do this, we're again very happy to make the introductions and very proud to celebrate our members well, actually, that's the thing, they don't have to be a member. Any Australian entity operating in Africa don't have to be Amig members. We want to sing it to the world, because really what we're about is promoting brand Australia in the world mining space, and of course our remit is Africa. We are not a global superpower in economic terms, but we are a global superpower in terms of mining. And increasingly so, we find that African destinations are looking to us and asking us, saying, we want to bring in Australian expertise. We want to open up Australian education, training, career development and skills development with Australian companies, because we know that looks very good on a CV. And so that's really what we're about, is bringing that together. So if we can celebrate brand Australia in the African resources sector, we will do so. And we want to keep doing a whole bunch more of it. Anyway, I heard earlier on, Adavale mentioned the Vaca Health Project. This is the most amazing, incredible project you've ever heard of. It's kicked off in Zimbabwe with a couple of brothers with a good idea, medical professionals, one's a nurse, recognising that everybody had a cell phone. And so bringing together some slimmed down technology to provide up-to-date training, wisdom and references to nurses and midwives. They said something like a 92% penetration rate of the Zimbabwean registered nurse market. The nurses and midwives are even able to update their certifications and through the applications that these guys developed. They are now 95% penetration. The numbers they're now engaged with, this slide is a little bit dated, I learned last night. They've now got 450,000 users. And their immediate next step is embracing everywhere from Kenya through to Zimbabwe and looking into West Africa as well. It's quite extraordinary. And every single person in the room that has interests in Africa could tap into this project. So they were, as we'd say in Australia, they were a shoo-in for winning this award. And we're very, very proud that they would consider nominating and helping us help them. And we're very proud that Adavale is associated as well. It's not been officially announced yet, but certainly over the next few weeks, that will be when the pilot program launches off with Adavale. I think the entire brand Australia mining sector will be watching. Second award for the evening was for the Emerging ESG Leader Award, Environmental Social Governance Leader, and that was awarded to Sarama Resources, a long-standing member of Amig, but honestly, we don't let that influence the judge's decision. Basically, it was a really good project. This is a small company, only 3 or 4 people with a low market capitalisation, doing what they can to make a difference to the communities surrounding their area of operations, and doing so successfully. I'm sure you can read the details there around the Nokama project, schools, education, employment, a garden, and the garden is linked with a company canteen, and it's basically developing a little circular economy which will survive in the transition from mining and indeed brings other skills. So we're very proud to see Sarama Resources awarded that prize. We've heard earlier from West African Resources, and West African Resources actually nominated in 2 categories and were successful in the Best Innovation in Corporate Social Development category, and again, setting the benchmark on how they're operating around their Sembrado project. Lots of details there, but I suppose you could say it's a situation that many Australian resources companies face. Low rates of education, high unemployment, poor socioeconomic security, and all eyes on the Australian resource company as to what they're going to do to help fix it. And certainly West African have been doing some really, really good things and perhaps setting a very high benchmark for other Australians to follow. And the last one, pleased to see in the room, is the Kilumu Bora project, or the Smart Farming project, which is basically a mushroom growing project led by a very small NGO, I think a one-person company, one-person entity based here in Perth, doing amazing things. And if I could just call out the first and the third bullet points here. Talk about aspirational, focused on food security, entrepreneurship, gender equality, climate change, nutritional health and the environment. So they're pretty high goals to go after, but the judges were extremely impressed by the recognition of the issues to be faced, the framework developed around it, and the scalability of this project and what it's delivering. They're summarised there in the third bullet. So that's all about the Australia Africa Awards as they were last night. And just in closing, we can't do any of what we do without our membership. And in particular, these members and partners help us do what we do. And I'd just like to lodge my thanks on behalf of Amig and indeed all our membership for helping us do what we do and letting us have a whole lot of fun doing it. Thanks very much for your time.